Martin Wallace is a name that needs no introduction in the world of gaming, and I have been interested in trying one of his war-themed games for a while, but they all seem pretty expensive. I was not sure that I wanted to invest in one of them. Luckily enough, now there is a new game of this type that just came out and that is pretty affordable. I found a copy online for around $20. The game is Test of Fire Bull Run 1861, designed by Martin Wallace and published by Mayfair Games. The title tells you pretty much what the game is about, and as you can imagine, this is a two-player game where a player will lead the forces of the Union and the other player will lead the Confederates. So let's keep this introduction short and let's see how the game plays. This is the initial placement of units on the map. You have the Confederate player setting up on the south side of the map and the Union player on the north side. This is a predetermined deployment. Unless you use optional rules, all games will start with units deployed in this position. In this game, the Union player is the attacker because what the Union player is trying to do is to take control of two of the following three areas: 1, 2, and 3. If he has control of two of those areas at the end of the game, he is the winner. Each player has a deck of cards that will be drawn and played during the game. When a player has completely depleted his deck and he must draw another card, that triggers the end of the game. At the end of the next Confederate player turn, the game will be over and you will determine who the winner is. There are also some instant death victory conditions. The Union player wins the game if at the end of any game turn he has control of this area. The Confederate player wins the game if at the end of any game turn he has control of that area. There's also a card that may grant instant victory if you force the opponent to rout. However, that card is effective only if you have previously eliminated a good number of enemy units, and that is not going to be very simple. Because, simply put, not many units will die in this game. Units will retreat, will be reduced, but to actually eliminate an enemy unit is pretty hard. There will not be many casualties, so in most games the rout card will not be a decisive factor. At the beginning of your turn, you roll dice to determine what actions are available to you. The Union player rolls 4 dice, the Confederate player rolls 3. After you roll, you pair the results with the numbers that appear on the command table, and in this case, for example, if this is the roll and this is the Union player's turn, then the Union player this turn can move his units once, can fire his artillery twice, and will draw a card. Whereas if this is the Confederate player turn and this is the roll, the Confederate player will be able to move his units once, to fire his artillery once, and to draw a card. Each time that you roll a 1, you draw a card from your deck, and the cards will grant you different types of benefits. You may be able to force an opponent to retreat an additional area. An opponent may be forced to discard one of his orders, so the opponent will have one less action that turn. You may receive an extra move. Your artillery may attack with more power for that turn. You may ignore a retreat result. So there are different types of benefits that you can receive. And the cool thing is that cards can be played at any time during your turn. You can play them before or after your actions, and the cool thing actually is that also the actions can be played in any order you want. So you can play all of your cards at the beginning of your turn and then execute the actions, or execute an action, play a card, execute another action, play 2 cards. So there are restrictions and strong ones when it comes to the actions that you can take depending on the dice that you rolled and the cards that you have. But then you also have great freedom, because you organize your actions in any sequence and combination that you want. For each fire order that you receive, you may use one of your artillery units to attack an adjacent enemy. For each fire order, you roll a die. If you roll 1 to 4, nothing happens. If you roll 5 or 6, then you score a hit, but then you had to roll again to determine the type of hit that you inflicted on the opponent. If you roll 1 to 5, one unit of the opponent is forced to retreat, and if you roll d6 on your second die, then the unit of the opponent is reduced. For each movement order that you receive, you can activate an area on the board and move up to 3 units from that area into an adjacent space. However, there are strict restrictions to the number of units that can cross a boundary during an activation. Units moving on the road can move in groups of 3 during activation, but then you have boundaries that are more restrictive. For example, only 1 unit can move across that boundary during activation, so it takes many orders to move a good number of units across that border. Most parts of the bull run will only allow 1 unit to move across during activation. Some parts will not allow units to move across at all. And then you have passages such as this one, where 2 units can move across if there are no enemy units on the other side. Otherwise, only 1 unit per order. And when there is no number printed on a boundary, that means that up to 2 units can move across that boundary for just 1 order. Infantry assaults do not have a specific phase during the turn. They are part of movement, and you can resolve them after each movement, or you can wait until you have completed all your movement, and then all units that are in areas that also contain enemy units will engage in combat. When infantry units are fighting, the units of the defender will fire before those of the attacker. For each unit that is firing, you roll a die. If you roll 5 or 6, you hit the opponent, otherwise it's a miss. For each hit that you inflict on the opponent, you roll a second die to determine the type of hit, similar to what you do for artillery. But infantry assaults are much more devastating. For each 1, 2, or 3 that you roll on your second die, you force a unit of the opponent to retreat, but for each 4, 5, or 6 that you roll, you reduce a unit of the opponent. For each leader order that you received at the beginning of your turn, you can choose to draw a card, or you can choose to use that order as a fire order for an artillery unit in the same area where your leader is, or you can use that order as a move order for units that are in the same area where your leader is. That means that a leader order has more flexibility in terms of what that order is, what you can do with it, but at the same time you have another type of restriction, which is spatial, because you can apply that order only to the area where your leader is. This clearly is a very abstract game, but it is designed by Martin Wallace. I wasn't shocked to see that the game was abstract. On the other hand, it is simple, linear. You can probably play it with very young gamers. It has a degree of chaos and unpredictability that sometimes players may find irritating. Sometimes you have a powerful attack that is just ready to be launched and the order doesn't come. But if you look back at history, you see that this is the case. That happened many times in history, that opportunities were missed and certain things that seemed to be very promising turned out to be ill-fated, precisely because there was a problem at the level of command. So you can see this as, I wouldn't say simulating, but I would say hinting at the confusion that you may have at the command level on the battlefield. And I like the fact that you have restrictions, but you can work around them in very different ways. I feel that you have more flexibility here than, for example, in Battlecry and in the games in the same system, where you can use your cards only on certain areas of the board. Here, sure, you will have actions that will be generated by the cards, but you can use those cards on any unit on the board. The same can be said for the orders that you roll at the beginning of your turn. So I really like this. There are restrictions, but they create a challenge, and in the end, at the end of a game, you often realize that really your decisions did matter a lot, even though there was a luck factor, and you see where you could have used your resources better, and maybe you will next time. The two sides play very differently from one another. The Union side seems to be more challenging to play because the Union has to attack, has to figure out a way to put together a powerful attack. The terrain works against the Union at different levels. Of course, there's the Bull Run that will make it very expensive to launch a powerful attack across it. But then there are woods all around the area where the Union player starts, and that means that the Union player will need to use many orders to move units pretty much anywhere. But on the other hand, the Union player has more orders, 4 per turn as opposed to 3 orders per turn for the Confederate player, so there you have a balancing factor. The Confederate player has the advantage of position, which is huge in this game. So, overall, I think that this is a pretty enjoyable game. If you do not mind the abstract quality, the gaminess, I think this is a game that is pretty fun to play. One minus is that it only has one map, one scenario, and it is a map with very specific restrictions. So I do not think that the replay value is going to be huge. On the other hand, the game doesn't cost too much, so I think you can still get enough gaming out of this game to make your investment worth it. And also, it is a game that can be easily expanded. It can be the beginning of a new system, just, you know, with new maps and maybe new cards, but I really think that the new maps would be key. So this is a pretty good game that I enjoyed playing as an abstract war-themed game, and I definitely hope that there will be more games made in this system.